Okay, so today's Daf Yomi is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh. It's Bava Kamma Nun Ches. We're going to start on Nun Zayin Amud Beis, 7 lines from the bottom. And our Daf Yomi is dedicated for Yeshua, for Am Yisrael, for Atzalah, for Am Yisrael. That Am Yisrael should be rescued during this difficult time. That Chayalim should be guarded. So the Daf Yomi tells us that it said in the Mishnah, if an animal falls into the garden and it falls on somebody else's crops and it benefits by not breaking its parts because it fell into the parts of the field, Mishalemes Mashanenis, that the owner of the animal pays what it benefits by not being hurt, but doesn't pay for all the damage that it did. So it says Rav benechbata. We're talking about a case where it fell on the ground, where we say it pays what it benefits by what it benefited through the fall, meaning say that it fell on the crops and trampled them and ruined them, and it benefited by the crops because therefore it didn't get hurt from the ground, it cushioned its fall. So therefore it pays by its benefit, but not, so the Gemara says, so the implication is, but if it ate it, I feel mashanenis and mashalemis. So the implication is that if it falls on the ground, it pays what it benefited. But if it falls on the ground, it pays what it benefits. But if it ate when it fell on the ground, instead of it just being cushioned, then even what it benefited, it wouldn't pay. Is that possible? Of course, that can't be logical. So Lema, Gemara says, Lema Rabu Tamei. Does this make sense? Because maybe Rab is consistent with his logic, because Rab says, if a person tried to feed an animal if somebody puts something dangerous for the animal in front of it, and the animal eats it, the person who put that dangerous food in front of it, Rab says is not responsible, because he could have said to the owner of the animal, your animal should have known not to eat it. So maybe here also in the reverse, the owner of the animal can say, your animal should have known my animal really wasn't supposed to eat it, so therefore it's not my fault. So the Gemara says, no. Amri Hachi Asha, the two cases are completely different. Imer Dama Rav Hasam, in that case over there, Rav would say, Rav would say, the animal should have known not to eat it. Hechi de Itzaka he the Matzi, because it's the one who is being damaged, and so therefore, since the animal there, that's in a situation where the animal is being damaged. The Matzi Amroi Mari de Pere Lo Mishalamna, because the owner of the fruits could say, I don't want to pay. Because he could say your animal shouldn't have eaten it. But but in the case where the animal itself did damage and the owner of the animal says, well, it's not my fault, my animal shouldn't have eaten it, that we wouldn't say. Ella, so rather the way to interpret what Rav is saying, this is what Rav is saying. How do we interpret what Rav is saying? Usually we use this phrase as a Mishnah. But this is, now we're applying it to Rav's statement himself. Not only in a case where the animal went out and directly ate the food, the Mishalemes, Mashanenes, that in that case, it only pays what it pays what it benefited, even though he wasn't negligent with his watching, because it actually benefited from it. But where the animal hit the ground, I might have thought that under these circumstances, the owner of the animal doesn't have to pay, because this is a case of what's called mavriach ari. I might have thought that the owner of the field was like somebody who chases away a lion from the possession of his friend, because he saved his friend's animal that it didn't get destroyed on the ground. And this is a mitzvah. Mavriach ari is a mitzvah. And so therefore, I might have said, since it's a mitzvah, I shouldn't have to pay you for putting your crops underneath my animal. And but in a case where the animal fell on the other person's crops, I might have thought he doesn't need to pay it, because it's the case of mavriach ari. Kamashma, we don't say that. The Gemara says, "Ve'ema hachanami mavriach hari." Well, why don't we say that? Why don't we say that this is the case of what's called mavriach hari minachse chave? Why don't we say this is the case of mavriach hari, and therefore he shouldn't have to pay anything? Gemara says, "Mavriach hari minachse chavero midaitohu." When you chase away the lion from your friend's possession, that's a case where the person does it with knowledge, the one who chases it away. And so therefore, that's why he doesn't have to pay. He got the mitzvah. I love midatu. In this case, he had no idea. And so therefore, since he has no idea, so this case, since he has no idea, therefore he's not going to get any reward. Inami mavriach harim minachse or else alternatively we could say somebody who chases away the lion, he has no loss. He's not losing any money. But in this case, is sleipseid. In this case, he's losing money, and so therefore, since he's losing money, therefore he's able to be reimbursed for the loss he has in his crops. Heichi nafal. So the Gemara says, how did this animal fall? How did this animal fall? In which case, we're going to say that it was total accident. Rav Kahana says, Rav Kahana says it fell by falling on its urine. Since it fell on its own urine, that's how it fell, and so therefore it's a total accident. Rava says, that another animal pushed it over the cliff, and that's how it fell into the other person's garden. The one who said that even where another animal pushed it, it's a total accident. For sure, if it fell on its own urine, that would be a total accident. And the one who says it slipped on its own urine, that's a total accident. But if its friend pushed it, then under those circumstances, we're going to say pisha, that's negligence. And then he has to pay not just what he benefited, but also for all the damage to Amrway, because the owner of the crops that were ruined by the animal falling could say, you should have been more careful with how your animals were walking. They could have walked one at a time. Amar Rav Kahana, so now Rav Kahana taught, Lo Shanu Ella Ba'osa Aruga. Basically, we had learned, when do we say that he's paying? When do we say that the animal is exempt for paying for all that he ate? When do we say that? We say that only in that specific row of vegetables, because since he fell there right away and he saw the vegetables underneath it, he couldn't stop himself, and so therefore he's an onus, and so therefore he only has to pay what he benefited, but not for all the damage that he did. Aruga, but if it goes from one patch to another, and it goes from one bed of vegetables to another bed, Mishalemes Mashi Zika, then he doesn't pay just what he benefited, but then he pays for all the damage. Meaning to say that the owner of the animal could have gone and stopped it. Even from one patch to another, even the whole day, he's going to be exempt. He only has to pay for what he benefited, but not for all the damage. Until the animal goes out and goes back with the owner's consent. Once the animal goes out and comes back with the owner's consent, then the owner has to pay not only what it benefited, but also all the damage that it did. Don't say that they know that the owners left the building, but rather, Ella Kivin Shayatzo Das, Alpha Pisha Chazer Shalo Das. Don't say Achatetzo Das Vitaso Das. Don't say that it went out with the owner's knowledge and it returned with the owner's knowledge, but rather, since it went out with the knowledge of the owners, and even though it returned without the knowledge of the owners, we're going to say that the owner is responsible for all the damage. My time. And the Amrway, Kivin the Yalfa, because we say because the owner should say, since once it learned how to do something wrong, anytime he has the ability, he's going to run there to eat. And so therefore he should have done an extra watching, an extra precaution. So So now the Mishnah tells us, the Mishnah said that if the animal went down in the normal manner and it does damage, then you pay not what it benefit, but all the damage that it did. So by Rav Yirmiyah asked the following question: Yarda Kedarko. Let's say the animal goes down into the field and it gives birth there. Vizika bimei leda, and then the animal does damage there with basically the liquid that comes out when it gives birth. Mahu, what are we going to think about the damage that it did? Ali b'demanda amar. So this is a case where the beginning was negligence and the end was an accident. So according to what it says, according to one who says, if you start with negligence but you end off as an accident, you're responsible. It's not even a question. Of course, you're responsible there. Where is it a question? It's a question according to one who says if you start with negligence, when you end off as an accident, you're exempt. What would we say in this case? We would say we would say since it started off with negligence, but it ends as an accident, you're going to be exempt. Or do we say in this case the whole thing is negligence? Since he saw that the animal was about to give birth, he should have been more careful. And therefore, since he saw it was about to give birth, he should have been more careful, and he should have been more careful by it and did a better shmir on it. So therefore, we leave this question unresolved. The Gemara says, how do we determine that it pays the damage as opposed to just what it benefited? So our Mishnah had said, what you do is you take, if you have a base saw, which is a small area of field, and you say, what is it worth? How much was the field worth with this vegetable in it and without this vegetable? We don't just look at that specific row and see how much the row went down, but we look at, which will be a much greater amount, but we look at the entire field. The entire field is the size of a base saw, which is not the entire field, but it's a larger amount of field. And you can imagine that this is much more, because you say, how much does it cost to break a window? If you broke a window, how much does it cost to replace it? But if you say the value of a house with a broken window, without a broken window, the house wouldn't be the exact same price. And so therefore, if you're looking at a base saw, the price is not going to diminish that much if you're just looking at the value of the entire base saw as opposed to the vegetables. So now the Gemara says, how do we know we look at the base saw and not just that row of vegetables? Amar Masna and the Amar Kra, it's based on the fact that the pasuk says, "Ubiar b'stei acher." It says, with respect to the damage that an animal eats in another field, and biar b'stei acher, that he eats in the other field. When the fact it says b'stei acher, Melamed sheshamin agav stei acher. This teaches us we evaluate it through another field. It means we don't just look at that patch. We look at a larger area, which is called a base saw. The Gemara says, how can you say that that's the source? Isn't that to tell us that we don't compare it to an animal that an animal is not responsible if it eats in the public domain? That's why it says in another field it's responsible, but not in the public domain. So the Gemara says, no, if that would be the case, it would have said if the consumption it did in his friend's field, or inami stay acher, or another field, my bistei acher, sheshamin agav stay acher, that we to look at the evaluation of on top of another field, that we compare it vis-a-vis a whole field. Or maybe we'll say that the whole verse is coming to teach us this, and not that you're not liable for the public domain. Gemara says, and how do we know it's also coming to tell us you're not liable in the public domain? Gemara says, and if that would be the case, that it's coming to tell us that you're not liable for the public domain, the Torah would have written this verse with respect to payments. It would have written because it says in the rest of the verse, Meitav Sadeo Meitav Carmel Yishalem. So it means Meitav Sadeo, from the best of the field, and Meitav Carmel Yishalem Bistei Acher, that you shall pay from the best of the assets these for another field. Why does the Torah say b'stei achar with respect to the destruction? To teach us both of these laws. First of all, that you compare it to a whole field and not to that patch. And number two, that you're only responsible for the food that it eats in another person's field, but not in the public domain. The Gemara says, how do we evaluate it? How do we evaluate it? Says the Gemara, we evaluate in the following manner. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Seya b'shishim seyin. We look at the base saw, which is a field, which is a small field, and we look at it b'shishim seyin with 60 saw, meaning to say that if you evaluate the base saw on its own, by itself, the mazik will lose, the damager will lose, because base saw is a very small area. And since it's so small, it's not typically sold. And therefore, poor people are the only ones who want to buy it. And since there's not a lot, and since they can't acquire a large area, they're going to buy this for more expensive. And the way to imagine it is, let's say you're buying a small apartment, you're going to end up paying more per square foot than if you're buying a large house. And so therefore, we're not going to look at the base saw as though it was the field in and of itself, because that would be very disadvantageous to the mazik. But rather, we look at the price of the land as though it was 60 seah, and then we take one portion of it, and we take 1/60th of it. So we look at it as though it's a very, very large field, and then we look at 1/60th of it to know how much 1/60th of that is worth, and how much that 1/60th is worth, basically without those crops in it now. And so therefore, that's a much smaller amount. Whereas Rabbi Yanai says, no, tarke v'shishim tarkarbim, basically half of that, meaning to say in 30, so not 60. It's a little bit more advantageous to the one who is damaged. Chizkiah says rather kelach b'shishim klachem, meaning to say we look at the amount that he ate by comparing it 60 times the amount. What is the value of the damage in the area that is 60 times the amount of that? So Meisvei, the Gemara challenges this. Let's say the animal eats a kav or kabayim. We don't say you should pay their value of a kav or kabayim in the marketplace, but rather we look at this patch, as though it is a small patch, and we evaluate it. Then comparing it to the small patch, and how much did it go down? My love, isn't our bifnei atzma? Don't we say that we look at it on its own? And this is basically an argument this is a contradiction to all three positions of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, who says we look at it 60 times the amount, Rabbi Yanai, who says 30 times the amount, and Chizkiah, who says by comparing it to 60 cabbages, and Mar says no b'shishim. No, he says we evaluate it like one of these positions, either 60 seah or 60 tarkavim or 60 kilachim. Tana Rabbanan, Mar brings a brisa that clarifies these laws. Tana Rabbanan, ein shamin kav mimnei shemashpicha. We don't look at the value of the kav that it ate, because that's going to cause him, the one who is damaged, to make money. Below base core, and we don't look at it, the value of a base core, that's going to cause him to lose money. My kamar, so what is he saying? Amar Papa Hacha Kamar, this is what the price is saying. Ein shamin kav b'shishim kav. And we don't look at the amount that he ate within a field of shishim kavim, nesha mashpiach mazik, because the mazik is going to basically make money there, because you're looking at a very small amount of food that he ate in a very, very large field. It's a very small amount. And we don't look at one core amongst 60 korin, which is a much smaller amount, because that is shapoge mazik, because it's going to cause the mazik to lose a lot of money, because the person who wants a piece of field that's only shishim core is going to pay a lot more for it, and so therefore the price of a core is much more expensive, and so therefore he's going to end up hurting the mazik. Mazik for Rafuna bar Manoach, high low base core. Why did it say low base core? Well, core me by it should just say low core. Elam Rafuna bar Manoach mishmei Ravacha bar Dervika Hacha Gitani. This is what it means. Ain't shamin kavim ne'atzma. We don't look at the kav on its own. Neshem mashpiach nizak, because this is going to help the nizak, because we're looking at it on its own, and that's going to be a lot more. Below kav the base core. We don't look at a kav in an area of a base core. Nizak, because that causes the nizak to lose money, because it's not worth anything, because the area of a kav is not going to be noticeable in a base core. Ela b'shishim. We only look at it in 16. So now we have a little bit of a story. Ahu Gavra, there was a man that cuts kashba mechavre, who cut down the palm tree of his friend. Also, coming to Reish Galusa, came from the Reish Galusha, and the Reish Galusha said to him, he says to the Reish Galusa, I saw that palm tree. The Reish Galusha says to him, I saw that palm tree. And there were 3 palm trees together. And they were worth 100 zuz. So therefore, since you damaged 1 palm tree, go give him a third of that. So the Mazik said to Gabi Rosh Galusa, you're applying Persian law. Why do I want that? I don't want you to apply Persian law. Also coming to Rav Nachman, and he says to Rav Nachman, he says to Rav Nachman, Bishishim. Rav Nachman says you look at it by comparing it to a field that's 60 times the amount. Like we just said, with a saw, you look at it by comparing it to 60 times the amount. So Rav said, if they said this where your money did the damage, i.e. your animal did it, Yomru beniske guf, or are they going to say where you yourself did the damage? And beniske gufa, where he himself does the damage, my where do you learn to say, where do you learn that you can't be lenient? The Tanya, because we learned Hamavkir Karmo Shochavera, somebody who destroys his friend's vineyard when the fruits are smadar, when they're just starting to blossom or bud. Rono so kami yosa yafek kodem and kami yafek achakam. Look at it, what it was worth before and what it's worth now. Vilu b'shishim lokatani. It doesn't say you compare it to 60 times the amount. But if that's your approach, atu gaba behimazu nami lo tanya ki agam, we have the same exact price to buy an animal. As it says katma nitia, that it says if you cut down and destroyed a tree, Rabbi Yossi says goes reikazeros b'shab Yerushalayim. Those who used to apply fines in Yerushalayim, they used to say nitia bashnata shtei kasef bas shtei shanim arba kasef. That's why you have to pay 2 kasef for a 1-year-old and 4 kasef for a 2-year-old. Achochaziz, if it ate the fodder. Rabbi Yosef says, we look at what's left. We look at what it's worth now. But if he ate the smadar, Rabbi Yoshua says, we look at it as though it's grapes ready to be cut. We look at what it was worth then and what it's worth now. Shimon Yehuda says, when do we say this? That we look at what the value of the land is diminished when you eat the shoots or the figs that when they're budding. But you ate them when they're fully grown. We look at them as though they're grapes ready to be cut. But anyway, we see from here, what does this Bryce say? Bryce said, they didn't say that we look at it by 60 times the amount. So therefore, why would you apply the distinction by men when here in this Bryce is by animals, it doesn't apply the distinction. Also by a person doing the damage, we view the same thing as though it's Shisha. All right, so this is the beautiful Daf Yomi for Shabbos. God willing, we'll review it tomorrow. A tremendous daf. A big shkoyach.